Welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I'm joined by Richmond, Hearthsinger Games.
It's
How are you?
me. I'm doing great. It's so great to be here, David. We met last year and I was so excited to get to chat with you again because it was fun getting to know you a little bit at the Cauldron back when we went places.
Yeah. The before the pre-apocalypse, and it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it feels like a different person.
Yeah. I mean, so it was right around this time
Oh my
last year.
god.
It
It
was
was.
because you know why? Because I happened to see the Cauldron, and you guys were doing a D&D thing.
Mhm.
And I was like, my anniversary's coming up and my wife's birthday, like, are all in October, the beginning
Yeah.
and end of October. So I was like, I could like finagle this all into a work thing and then,
It's perfect.
and then write it off or something. Right. So I had reached out to the culture, and obviously what you guys were doing was really cool. You guys were doing a live D&D show at the Cauldron, and the Cauldron is a really cool backdrop for that kind of thing,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a fantasy tavern bar
It was
that's
honestly just
interactive.
cool to get to play D&D there, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, I was like I get to play D&D in the most like aesthetically awesome environment I could have imagined, and I didn't have to set it up. Like I mean I
Yeah.
had to set up our stuff, but like as far as, the ambiance was all there, and that was just a true pleasure for sure.
Well, yeah, like that place is literally a place you might find in a D&D world, right?
Mhm.
You have a tree that spits out beer essentially that you
I
activate with
I
a
don't mind
wand.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, so I was like, this is a cool thing. Can roll the some of the expenses into the business side and write them off, and and I think my wife will enjoy it. Um, and then the folks at the Cauldron were great. They like comped us a bunch of stuff, and that was really nice.
It's
Um,
awesome.
and we just had a good time watching you guys be nerdy.
That's what we do. That's what I do best, I think. It's so much so that now it's all I do.
Well,
It's all I do.
let's circle back to that. So, what
Yeah.
exactly is it you do? So, for people that are unfamiliar.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a Twitch streamer, and my Twitch stream is at Hearthsinger Games. And so when I'm streaming like 3 to 4 times a week, I will be typically either playing TTRPGs that people are watching, or hopefully, or I'll be playing an RPG, or like right now I'm playing through Baldur's Gate. I played through Alien Isolation, like things that just have really strong stories, and then talking about them and usually relating it back to tabletop RPGs or character creation, or like why I think certain things work as character choices in a game like that. And so that's been what I do there. And then over on YouTube, or here on the YouTube where we are now, the illustrious YouTube, I put out weekly videos, usually about like GM tips or character creation tips every single Wednesday. And every once in a while I'll do, like, I think recently I did a video that I think every YouTuber knows the feeling of, like, I'm doing this, I know it might flop, but I'm just going to do it anyways because I really want to. And I've been playing through Hades. I don't know if you've had a chance to play that, but it's basically a game where you play Zagreus, the son of Hades, and you attempt to escape the underworld. It's like a roguelike game, and so you're just dying over and over again and getting stronger and stronger every time and going further and further every time. And there is just, it's by Supergiant Games, which is just known for having these really incredible musical moments, and I am nothing if not a bard. So I walked in, and it was one of those magical moments in a game where you just walk in and there's music, and I stopped playing for 30 minutes listening to this song that this character was just singing. And I was like, I must sing it. I must cover this. So I did. So sometimes you get musical covers or songs that I've written about my D&D characters, or story times from D&D games I've been in. So yeah, that's the kind of content I have over here on the YouTube.
which we have some links down in the description and also in the pinned post afterwards for people to go check out, which I
For
recommend you
sure.
do. Yeah, so I don't actually play video games.
Yeah.
I don't I have a very compulsive, addictive personality. And I tend if I when I do those things, I tend not to do other things in my life. So like I'll stop eating and bathing
Yeah,
and working.
I think I absolutely recognize that pattern in myself, which is why I really like that I have a time to play games and a time to do other stuff. And I will be honest with you that I had been playing video games a lot, maybe 5 to 8 years ago, and then as you know, I had been playing D&D before that, but it started to take more time in my life because I wanted to be in multiple games. I wanted to run a game. I wanted to play in like 6 games. It's a
Yeah.
problem. I'm not addicted at all. I can stop anytime I want, David. No, but yeah, so ultimately, I think tabletop really took over my life, and it wasn't until I started getting back into Twitch where I was like, one day a week when I'm not playing a tabletop game or painting miniatures, right? Like I'm gonna play a video game. And I started getting back into it, and now that's kind of the time that I have dedicated to it, and it's nice because it doesn't really bleed out the edges. There was a small problem when I started playing uh oh god, what was it? You're in space. Why can't I think of it? It'll come to me in a minute, I'm sure, when we're not talking about it anymore. But there was a game that I started playing with members of my community, and Destiny, there we go. And I had to stop. I reached critical mass danger zone levels of Destiny.
And it was time for cold turkey.
Yeah, I was like, this is great. I have to stop, because the smart thing that they do in that game is they make it so that if you queue up for something, you just keep queuing. You don't even have to press the queue button.
Yeah.
And it's like little serotonin capsules that just burst. They burst in your mouth like mochi. It's great.
Well, technology and social science has gotten to this insidious level where they know how to push all of our buttons and just keep us in. So yeah, so I just stay away from video games in general because
Yeah.
I entertained briefly. I was like, well, Baldur's Gate would be right on brand for us.
Yep.
I can start playing that, and I was like, oh, I'll get trapped in that. I know. I'll be like, well, I'm working. But then I won't actually do any other work.
Yeah.
So
Well, I've been playing it, and it's been really fun. It's weird to see, like, it is very hard to be responsible for everybody in a D&D party, because you have to be everyone. And so I think I've kind of enjoyed the times where I've played multiplayer a little bit more, if that makes sense, just
Right.
because everybody can kind of be in charge of their own stuff. And I find I make so many hilarious mistakes on stream when I'm playing by myself, because I'm just having to micromanage everybody and people. I'm just like, Mage, get your ass out of the fire. Like, hey, you Ranger, go stand over there. What are you doing? Like, it's
go range.
it's,
For the love of
it's
God.
so difficult, because I always say that it's like playing Baldur's Gate 3 early access is like playing D&D with the most punishing GM you have ever had, where it just assumes that your characters want to path in the weirdest ways. Like, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to click here on this road. The rest of the party is going around the road, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Where's my character? Where is she? And then I hear, ow. And I look, and she has climbed a building, walked over the roof, and jumped off the other side for no reason. No, none that I can determine, certainly. And I was just like, cool. Great. Thanks.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Oh man. So so it reminds me of like the party mom. You have to be the party mom, except
Yeah, that's
for
what it
with
feels like.
even more bookkeeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool to see how they've included so much recognizable like rule stuff from D&D, as far as like bonus action, action economy, different spells you can get, and they might work a little bit differently because of the I guess the setup for
Yeah.
it being a video game. But it is really cool to see some of that translated and some of it visually. Although, like, I'm perfectly fine with the images in my head. I like to describe it as like, I don't need this, but it's fun to see somebody else's take.
Yeah, the interpretation. Are you playing a bard?
The bards are not available yet. They will be. But if you should have seen my face when I was like, I can't be a bard.
Yeah.
What the hell am I supposed to be doing here?
I want to talk to your manager. It's time
I know.
to go.
I was like,
Karen.
ma'am, my name is Karen and I have a complaint. So I played a wizard first, but I did end up in a video this past week making a video about making a lot of my D&D characters in the character creator, because that's honestly, like, that's the most fun part of the game.
Is the character creator.
Yeah, there's just so many options. And it's fun to be able to, I like to draw, but I'm not like a very good artist. So when I like to imagine like what my characters look like, this kind of gives me a chance to see it all together. And it's kind of the same feeling I get when I'm painting miniatures, that when I'm painting a miniature for my character, an idea that I had in my head suddenly just feels better when I'm looking at it and can say, well, actually, all these colors are too similar. It needs some pop. There needs to be something memorable about how this hero looks. And so that's been really cool to kind of realize in the character creator and say, like, I want to be this. I want to have purple skin and white hair and be super cool. And then I realized, like, oh, but what if I had seafoam hair? Because green is the complementary color to purple. And so stuff like that is just, I could sit in the character creator for way too long, way too long.
Yeah. For a hot second, I was like, I could just get it and just play with the character builder. And then maybe we could do some videos on that. That might be fun.
You could, and you should. I highly recommend it. It's very fun. Right now you can be a halfling, a dwarf, a drow, a high elf, a half elf, and a Githyanki, I think. That might be all of them. And then
that's weird.
Well, Githyanki are a big part of the story. So they pulled them in, right? I would say, like, if you like Illithid stuff, if you like Mind Flayers, like, this is definitely a story to play through. And the nice thing about having early access is it's only levels 1 through 5. So there's an end point that is not, well, I'm not going to say not 40 or 50 hours into the game, because you can easily do that. But for people who want to check it out, I just say, it's a good game if you love D&D and you want to, like, see somebody else's take. It's really pretty astounding what they've created, even in an unfinished game. But you might as well wait a year until the full stuff is out.
Yeah, cinematics were so good on that I've seen. So
absolutely.
That's what I'm really waiting for it all to come out and all the cinematics to be uploaded to YouTube so I can just watch that.
So you can just watch it and be. I will also say, like, the music is like good, and highly enjoy it. The music good, GUD. No, I like to enjoy it and, like, hang out with. It's a good, like, hanging out with a stream kind of game, because you really are going at your own pace. As opposed to games that, like Phasmophobia, which I've been playing, which is a ghost hunting game, which I never should have started playing because I don't like to be scared that particular way. But I thought it would be entertaining, so I did it anyways. But that one kind of, like, grips you and you can't really pay attention to anything else. Yeah.
So that might be a bad idea if you're not into playing horror games.
Yeah. Well, what do you feel about horror RPGs?
I can't see it as a campaign, but definitely like one shots and stuff like that. I kind of like that stuff. I feel like horror is hard to sustain, right? Because you start getting numb to it, right, after a while, and it doesn't have the same effect. You had mentioned playing the Alien game. Have you checked
Yeah.
out the RPG? I've heard good things about that.
Yeah, we got to play a one shot of that on my channel. Actually, Ellie, who's in chat, was in that game. We had a good time. I very much liked it, and I love the guys from Free League. I'm actually on a podcast with Ellie that is called Vassin. Well, the podcast is called The Lost Mountain Saga, but the game that they've released is like this Nordic horror game called
Yeah.
Vassin. And Ellie is from Sweden. And so we just have this really unique GM experience where Ellie takes us through this horrible tale of things that go bump in the night and creatures that, I don't know. There's something about it that's very different from. I mean, there's a lot about it that's different from D&D, but as far as the setting, it's this, sense of the sensibility of the old world brushing up against, the industrial period in Sweden, and people sort of trying to change from their rural lives into lives in cities and with factories and production, and how all of these mythical Nordic creatures sort of react to that and interact with it and and punish or not the populace. And you play characters in the setting who can see them and therefore are tasked with trying to understand and set things right or end problems however you need to.
Fix it. You gotta. Somebody's got to fix it. Yeah. I've not seen that yet. Our website manager has been talking about it.
Oh yeah, it's so good. And if you like the system that Alien has, is very similar. And I also like it because I think it sings best when you honor the time period you're in, which might not be for everybody. But for me, on our podcast, which again, you can find at lostmountainsaga.com, on our podcast, I play Astrid, who is a young woman who has always had an interest in the occult and these old mythic stories from her part of the world, but who is a young, blonde, beautiful woman in that time period. And doctors don't want to talk to her, and priests don't want to talk to her. And that was something that Ellie and I talked about before we started playing, which is, again, one of the reasons I think having a session 0 is so important, which is like, we could talk about that forever. But she was like, you are going to play in the time period. And so I've had to navigate a lot of really interesting situations as playing a woman in that time period who is married and a wife, but who is trying to solve these problems, but can't always be the upfront solution. And since I, as Anne, always just want to talk about things with and roll a diplomacy or persuasion check, that's been a really fun experience for me to play through. And it's very spooky and appropriate for the season, the reason for the season, as they say. So we have our third episode is coming out this Thursday, and Ellie has done a great job with adding an ambiance to the podcast. So really you get a good sense of place, and it's very fun. So yeah.
So she's doing a good job of scaring you guys.
Yeah, I don't like it. Oh, I love it. But yeah, I think the thing about it is she and Sydney, the other person on the podcast, and I all really love playing together. So I think in the beginning, we were making a lot of jokes, but it got pretty serious pretty fast. And then those jokes were not as prevalent. And as I like to say, if you didn't experience PTSD in D, were you even playing?
Yeah.
That's just my style of gameplay for sure.
Within our social contracts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Folks, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Just put question in front of it because it just makes it easier for me to pick them out. Mm-hmm. SHS wants to know, can you talk about how to have a good session 0?
Sure. Yeah. I think I did a podcast on my Patreon about this, and it boils down to understanding how important communication is about the game you want to offer and the game your players want to play. And that's everything from I want to play in a fantasy world to I don't want to live in a world where, like, complete polar opposite from what I was talking about earlier. I don't want to live in a world where racism exists. I don't want to deal with anything that involves gaslighting or sexist behavior. Like, you can go down an entire list, and there are lots of people who have spent a lot of time creating, you know, your X card list or your lines and veils and all that stuff. And I think a lot of the problem is that, like, a lot of people jump into D&D, and like we all do. I definitely wasn't having session zeros like that back in the day when I first started playing.
Mhm.
Right. And so many people today will be like, well, I've never done that and it's been just fine. And the problem is that it is always just fine until you have really hurt somebody.
It's like insurance, right? It's useless until you actually need it.
Exactly. But I also just think it's really useful, even just to say, so what's the genre we want to play in? I remember recently we had a session zero where I was really struggling. We were playing Cats of Cthulhu, which is on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. But it is a Cthulhu game, but where you are all cats. And I was like, I'm confused. And, like, is this a cartoon? Is this the Aristocats? Like, what's the style? What are we aiming for here?
And when you're playing cats, Cthulhu just doesn't seem quite as evil.
Well, yeah. Well, when you think about it as, like, cats understand the truth of the world, right? They understand what is most true, but they have their own particular lens that, like, they are the true inheritors of this earth, and humans just live here, and they are to be used or not, right? And the idea of the game, I think the game works best when you treat it as being very serious, even though you are cats, being very serious and having kind of like a T.S. Eliot, not Cats the movie, but like T.S. Eliot's original poems for cats, and then like like an Edward Gorey twist on top of it. And thinking about it in those kinds of like shades and imagery helped us really hone in on, like, what is the style of role play that we should be leaning into. And so conversations like that, no matter what you're playing, right, like, I think are really, really helpful. So those things, talking about table safety, what people do want to play. And I also hear a lot of times, because in session zero we're talking so much about, like, what's going to work for the players, a lot of I'm going to use the term grognard, but like old-timey DMs are like, well, what about the game I want to play? I don't want to break my world. And I'm like, to you, I say you don't have to, unless you want to play with those people who don't want to do that stuff. So it's as important for a GM. Like, if you've been writing a campaign for 10 years and you want to give that as a gift to a table, then you need to find a table for that game. You don't need to tell people that they're wrong for not wanting to play that game.
Yeah, generally what we've been doing is the GM comes to the table with a couple pitches.
Yeah.
And so for starters, as the GM, don't pitch something you're not interested in running, right?
Yep.
I've seen one of the things I've seen recently with session zeros and social contracts is a lot of times, like almost every time, I've seen the session zero come first and then the social contract. But in my last couple of experiences, I realized it should be the other way around. Like, they kind of go hand in hand, and you can not have a social contract, but you should incorporate those elements into your session zero. Mm-hmm. And I will say you should do them first, because it's really easy to do things on your session zero that might be problematic for people without thinking.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of it comes down to, like, I know this is a hot button word for a lot of people, but it comes down to privilege, right? Like, there are things that I don't think about until I hear somebody else's point of view, and I would have never thought about how that would be problematic. And so it's important to keep your minds open and to educate yourself as best you can. And remember that it's a game, right? But, like, I make it my job to try and learn more about that, and to play with diverse people and new people. I have a lot of people who played in the same group for years and years and years. And while I think that's totally valid, like there is no right way to play D&D. I'm just about helping people on my channel not hurt each other and have like a great time, whether they're the GM or the player. Like that's all I want to provide as advice is if this tool works for you, then put it in your toolbox. And if it doesn't, like have a good time. As long as you're not hurting people, it doesn't bother me at all. But at the end of the day, I don't know, it's your responsibility to go out there and get tools. And I find that I have been able to learn so much more quickly by playing with tons of different people. And part of that is about finding out where you best need to spend your time, obviously, because you can't play with everybody. There are only so many hours hours in the day.
No, that is super true. And I mean, we were one of those groups that, like, for the longest time, we had kind of like a core group that was together for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And then when we started Nerdarchy, then we started getting exposed to a lot more people, play styles.
Yeah.
And it fundamentally kind of changed how we even do our own games. Like, we went from, we meet every Saturday night, we play D&D, it's these same people, to, to like, we were alternating between 3 GMs and essentially 3 groups, with, some crossover between them. But for the most part, they were just, different people configured in, which, gives a different play experience. It gave a chance for, not to have the same person doing all the GMing. And also, like, then we would like sneak in a rotation of a game that wasn't D&D. So there's a lot of benefits to that. And, also, I know people, and like you said, they're like, well, why do you want to waste time with a session zero? I only have so much time. And, especially as we get older and we have more responsibilities. Yeah. But I've seen many a game fall apart, and I feel like the thing that makes them fall apart is not having a plan.
Oh yeah, it's 100% that. I mean, I totally agree. I think, I've seen any amount of like problem players come and go and having to have difficult conversations with people and all that kind of thing. But it wasn't until I got to the very end of Storm King's Thunder and in the final session, I had spoken to the GM about an issue that I had, but I knew another player at the table had it and hadn't. And stuff happened during that final session where, our characters both died. And I felt, because I had that conversation, that I was very much in control of the choices that I made to get me there and to, sacrifice myself for the greater good and achieve something really cool. But ultimately, the other person didn't. And there we were sitting there 3 years in a campaign together, playing every single week, celebrating birthdays and engagements and anniversaries with these same people, your found family, right? And because of Dungeons and Dragons, it exploded at that table when that other player died and felt that like it was completely unacceptable how it happened, but had never expressed any issues about the way that things were being handled until that point. They exploded. And we had a conversation about like, so character death, how do you guys want to handle that in the beginning? Had people expressed how they felt about that kind of stuff, I don't think we would have gotten there. And it exploded, and those people don't really talk anymore. And it's the saddest thing in the world to me. Like, I play with both of them in 2 separate games, and I love those games both equally for different reasons. But it's very sad. I think seeing that was enough to like really sell me on the idea of like, don't be lazy. Just have a session zero. Just have one. What's the worst thing that people can say? Someone can come in and answer like, yes, I'm fine with all of these types of content. Yes, I'm fine with permadeath. Yes, I'm fine with control being arrested from me in these scenarios. Like, if they say yes to everything, then great. But for the one person who says no, I would rather know about that. I would rather give them a chance to voice it than not.
We've definitely had awkward moments at the table over the years, and some things like that will definitely help with that. Also, too, like there's other things, right? Just like I feel like setting out like we're gonna play this game for 12 sessions or 24
Yeah.
sessions. Like bookkeeping stuff like makes it super conducive to having a game that continues and doesn't die because we've had like tons of those
Oh yeah.
over the years as well. So
Well,
like
people ask a lot, like, how do you get a continuing, like, how do you get a consistent D&D game? So what do you think about that? What do you do to ensure that your game is going to be consistently running?
well, that's what I mean. Like over the years, we've had so many stops and starts to games. It wasn't until we started doing things like setting a deadline. Like the GM knows they're running 12 sessions, and then we're going to discuss a new game, right? The new game could be the old game continued, but it just I feel like it just like takes the pressure off the GM.
Yeah.
And this isn't like this thing that's just going to go on forever. And also it like creates these boundaries where it's like, there's only a finite amount of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So I think that also pulls the other players in line too, because if there's only, so many sessions, then they're less likely to miss. I feel like, I mean, it still happens, but that's what helped for us. I mean, that and like a big thing was for us was just rotating out GMs and not having the same GM run every week and until they got bored or burned out on it. And then because that always caused someone to want to either take a break and then someone will take it up and we're like, we'll go back to this thing. And
you just never will.
We never go back to this. So many finished campaigns.
I think asking people to be really clear about when they're burned out and done is really important because, for me, I know not everybody. Some people are like, I could roll 5 characters every day and love them all equally, and if he dies, he dies. Like that's fine. That is not me. I'm perfectly happy for my character to die, but I have to care. I have to care deeply about what this person wants to achieve with their short life, which adventurers' lives often are. And so if somebody needs to stop a game, I need them to not give me the hope that it'll come back.
Yeah.
I just need them to tell me like, this is over. Can we like write an epilogue or like this is decide as a group how it ends? Like I need to cap it off somehow. And so I need to express that to people, right? But I think it's much like you're saying, I do something a little bit different. I say like, this is the type of group I want to be in. I only have time for so many weekly games. So I have one game that meets every Monday. I'm very excited to play it tonight, I will tell you. And I meet with them every single Monday as like without fail, unless something happens, right? And then I have the second tier of I can only play so many games once every other week. And then other games that I can only play once a month. And being clear about that, about what I want from a game and what other people want from a game has allowed none of that weird, like, I thought we were going to be playing this every week, but we've missed 2 sessions. Like, just tell people how much D&D you want to play. I mean, much like you expressing to me earlier that you don't want to get addicted to a video game and then be like in trouble, right? Like a lot of other people are like, dude, D&D takes it out of me sitting for 4 hours in one place and not moving. Like, I just can't do it more than once every other week. Like, just figure that out about yourself. You can only do that by playing more D&D. You're welcome. But you need to play enough D&D till you understand, even if it's just one shots, like how much D&D you want to have, so that you can find it and then not agree to too much. That's on you not to overextend yourself, because every time you do, you're getting the buy-in from the GM who has to do all this work, all the other players who are creating their characters and investing in them emotionally and creatively. And so it can create that weird animosity of like, oh, Karen always misses games. Why is she always skipping games? Like, Karen actually created that issue for Karen, because Karen was not, whoever Karen is, was not clear about what she wanted. So I think that's also just an important thing to think about for people, is just be clear about what you want commitment wise.
that goes a long way
Yeah.
in stemming some of those things. Yeah, and like you said, just self governing. They're like, oh, this
Hmm.
is what I can do. This is what I can't do, and then and then sticking to your guns
Yeah.
with it.
And like I'm talking big right now. I'm like, you got to say this, you got to say that. I just realized recently that like I'm playing too many games. And then I had to figure out like which of my children do I kill? Like
Yeah,
which of these people who have been investing in games with me do I have to like let down? And I started thinking about it as like, I've given a lot to these tables and they've given a lot to me, and that's okay. It's okay to step away from something, and it's all in how you handle it. So I went to the GM and I said, listen, I'm overextended. I need another night of the week where I can stream like a D&D game that I run, and Tuesday has to be that night. So that means that we have to find an ending for my character in the next 8 sessions. And I think that that was the best way to handle that, because it gave that person like a runway, much like you were saying earlier, of like, I have 8 sessions to like figure out a way to do this. And I was like, I'm open to however it needs to happen. Does she need to die? Does she need to get what she wants and leave the party? Like, however it happens, I'm open to it. But she got eight 4-hour sessions, and that's it.
that's pretty generous.
Well, I mean, I also knew like ahead of time, like this is how much
Yeah,
I can do, right? Like that's just me getting used to uh being a direct person who can say like, hey, this is working for me, this is not working for me. And that takes practice. It's a
yeah.
muscle, right? Having to say the thing that's unpleasant to say in the kindest way possible is a muscle. And especially if you're planning on being a GM, it is a muscle you must exercise.
That's like telling 4 jobs you're out.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's hard, but I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary. How have you dealt with problem players at your table, Dave?
I think we just don't invite them back a lot of times. Is
Mm-hmm.
what's happened. I mean, we've been pretty. It's weird. So like, I've played with a lot of family. So like, our group is kind of consisted of two brothers, my two brothers, and my
Mm-hmm.
brother-in-law, and other people. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of a different dynamic. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
because you know if when there's problems, it's between family members. So like, it's like you have to kind of figure that out as well. But you know, I must say, over the years, I don't feel like we've had that many, and the few that we've had kind of like have sorted themselves. We've been lucky, I
Yeah.
think. Or we just haven't asked them back, uh or or sometimes it's not even like the person per se, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, like when we had a person, we were meeting in person and they moved a bit further away and they couldn't
Right.
make it, and we were virtualing them in, but
Mm-hmm.
like, it was just kind of a bad experience, and we're
Yeah.
like, we would like to have you here, but not like this, because it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, again, being able to express that stuff is important. And also like realizing that you might receive feedback from the group is also like an important thing. Like I've received feedback from my groups, and it doesn't mean that you need to get defensive about it. But I think there are times where I think it's like you have to realize how to have those kind of like fierce conversations or difficult conversations, or especially as a GM, be a mediator between people if they don't feel
Yeah.
comfortable just talking about it together. Some people want to, I always open up at the end of games that I'm running. And certainly, so I play in a Starfinder actual play game on my channel on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. But it is also available as a podcast on Anchor, which is called Starfound. And we finish our game, and then at the end of every game, to the extent that everybody is comfortable, we have a talk back where we talk about stuff that happened, good and bad. And I really like to try and normalize that for our viewers, because I think that a lot of times what happens is like GMs will be like, so how's the game? People be like, good, and pack up their bags and then leave, and then be like, but I really hate that so and so's rogue stole everything from the party. They're constantly doing that. It's really annoying. I feel, whatever they're feeling, they have separately. And so ripping off that band-aid of saying like, hey, we're all open to talking with each other if you weren't happy about what went on today. And then also adding the caveat that, if you don't feel comfortable talking about this here, you need time to process what you really feel, like reach out to me later during the week and we'll set something up to like have a conversation. That's kind of how I run things at my table, and that's how we've done things on Starfound, and we've been playing that game for 2 years now, so I think it works pretty good. But I also think it's fun to have conversations, since we are sharing it with an audience. I have a friend who like hates planning sessions, and she's like, we planned for 30 minutes today, and I hated it, and I just wanted to do something, and giving her a chance to talk about that and have us figure out as a group, like, what's a good balance so that everybody has fun when we get in those scenarios.
I feel that's so hard.
Yeah. Do you hate planning?
I hate excessive planning.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, it's like, let's just make a decision and do something.
Yeah, because it's not going to survive.
Yeah, the plan is never going. It always falls apart.
Yeah, I always say, in that game, I play the captain, and Captain Amaru Kyuka, a Vlaka Solarian. She's like a big wolf woman with armor and a fist weapon made of hard light, and she's everything. She's the best. But I always say, do not let perfect be the enemy of good enough, because you can't plan past a fuck up. Like, you can't do that. And so at the end of the day, it's better to have the objectives in mind and like cool tools that you guys have, and go in with like an initial plan, but then be ready to prioritize your objectives once it falls apart. And
their games too, right? So like, eventually what's going to happen too is like, you've got this stuff all worked out and planned out, and everything goes great up until the moment it doesn't, because all your roles have been good except for this final one, and it was the linchpin.
Yeah,
and everything falls apart.
That's really rough. I like hate that feeling. You know what I mean? Like I hate having, and I think the reason that I hate that feeling is because we spent 45 minutes making a plan, and now that feels like wasted playtime because it was frustrating and hard and difficult and fiddly, I guess would be the best like description of it. And then you're there and it didn't even matter. So I like to, between Helena's desire to never plan anything and other people's desire to like have a plan, again, I think like the good thing is, so what's the basic idea of like the best way to get into this facility or whatever you have to do to even start the conversation or the theft or whatever it is, and then figure out like, so if something goes bad, we can't leave without X. And then once you know those two things, just go, because you'll have a better time thinking in the moment with each other.
Or does that then lead us to, wait a minute, you're right, the plan is never going to work. It never does. We need a plan B and C. So then 40 minutes of planning.
Worst. Oh my God.
40 minutes of planning just blows up even bigger.
There's someone in my Avernus group who drives me crazy, and I love him so much. But he plays our bard, and he always is like, okay, so this is plan A, and this is plan B, and this is plan C. And he is really good at containing all of that. In his mind works that way. And again, mine is like on the spectrum of like, I just want to jump in with my saber drawn, versus like, I have a million different ways that I've come up with that this could go. I'm kind of in the middle of those two places. And so I always drive him so crazy in those sessions, because I'm like, you realize none of that is going to happen, right? And he's like, but it could happen, and then we'll be ready. And I'm like, we could do this forever. Like, we could sit here forever.
I'm also an instigator player anyway, so So that's the antithesis to the planner player
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Do you play a
definitely
lot of
like.
barbarians?
I have played a few barbarians. I do like to kick
I
in the
can
door from
tell,
time to time.
Dave. I can tell.
Although I guess
Yeah.
in 5e, my longest running character was a fighter wizard.
So what's
So
your favorite class? Like this is such like a vanilla D&D question, but what is your favorite class?
the one I'm playing now. No,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
hard
sure. Get that.
honestly because I'm always trying to like, okay, what haven't I played yet? What's different? What's the concept? And I feel like I'm all over the place. I don't really feel like I don't really feel like I have a favorite. As long as you play a dwarf, it's probably going to be okay.
That's totally fair. I feel like I always played elves and half elves, and now I'm
Mm.
like Asimar. Asimar are Bay for me. But as far as ancestries go, but so I will always want to play a bard or some class that is a charisma class. Like that's a given. And for a long time, I refused to play paladins because I didn't want to deal with religion and I didn't want to deal with all that stuff. And now life is different.
Yeah, now like
Because
yeah.
now life is different because I find that people who really want something are the most fun for me to play and less people who like just happen to be in a place at a particular time. Again, that's for me personally. That's more fun for me to investigate. And people who have dedicated themselves in that way to a higher power, man, they must want something. And so I'm actually playing two paladins right now, and they're both super different. One is in that Monday game with Snoots, who's in chat right now. It looks like, which is in the Acquisitions Incorporated adventure, and then my other one is in Strahd, where we've taken the Irina NPC, and I actually play Irina as a player character because I joined that party after they had already been playing for a little bit. And I knew enough about that adventure to know about Irina, like vaguely.
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds like an awful experience. I love it. Like, and it has lived up to that. It has lived up to be just about as heartbreaking as it can be.
We just got her murdered in our
Dave!
game.
No, man. Yeah, I remember the day that Strahd was like, and we're gonna get married, and I was like, nah, like
yeah.
I was terrified, but I was like, what is happening? And like from there on out, just it opened up a lot. I think in the original base adventure, it's easy to just get her murdered, right? Just like everybody else, you can get murdered in that adventure. But I think that gave her again a real reason to fight against Strahd, to have to represent all of these people who've been victimized by him over the years. Gave her, and she's an oath of heroism paladin. So like really being a hero is for me about service to other people. And so her service as a hero is to like stand up for all those women who've died because of what Strahd wants and what he represents. And so that's been cool. But Bard is the best. And my Bard that I've been playing for a few years now is someone asked in chat, favorite Bard college. And I am a College of Glamour Bard because if you can't be David Bowie, then what is the point?
Why
ask
bother?
you.
Yeah.
Why bother? Dance, magic, dance.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of the College of Swords.
Yes, College of Swords, College of Whispers. There's so many good colleges, you guys.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, and I always mistakenly call it the College of Blades because in second edition, one of the kits was a blade, and it's basically the College of Swords.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I like College of Glamour is because I hate charm person, but I just want people to like me, like genuinely like me. Yeah. And so the fact that you get like a mass charm person just from having people listen to you sing or perform or orate or however you've chosen to be a bard is like it's the best because they don't feel the effects of a charm spell where they're like, oh, I've been had, I've been manipulated.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
and I also didn't, I with this particular bard, again, I'm not bard shaming anyone, you do you. But I wanted to really lean away from the stereotypical, like, I'm a lech
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
feel. And I decided to make her somebody who had been the ingenue like 10 years ago, but now has like lived what everybody would say is a traditional tale. And now your story is over. Like, she saved her family. Her husband's a dragon. She has twin sons. But
Yeah.
like, then her husband is like, so that's it for you, right? You're 25. Life is over. And she's like, I'm not a book you can put on the shelf, sweetie. Like, that's not how this works.
Nice.
And so now she's, a middle-aged like bard woman out there, living that mom life. And it's been so delightful to be that and to experience, because I've played other bards before because it's my favorite class, but to experience life a little bit differently and what a charisma class is, what a skill monkey can be, in a new and different and heartbreaking way.
That's definitely a different take. I'm definitely digging it. I've had players play those kind of characters in my games as well, and it just adds a whole nother dynamic.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
we we had a long running game that's over on the channel. I
Yeah.
think it went like 60 some sessions.
Wow.
And yeah, so those characters went from like 5th, 6th to 20th. Um and one of the characters like had a husband and a kid that she would like go out, earn the bacon and bring it back, and she was, her character was a rogue, and she'd come home and they just wouldn't talk about how she earns the money a lot of times. But it added a lot of like interesting dynamics to the game once we did have a couple sessions where she did go back with the group to where she was from and encountered the spouse and the
Yeah.
child, and the child even had some close calls because they put them in the game, so
Yep.
they become fair game.
Yeah.
But it took the story in like directions that were very unexpected.
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
and also like they had added some things in, like their husband was estranged from their family
Yeah.
for marrying this particular elf,
Yeah.
and but left it kind of open ended, so it gave me room to kind of get in there and fiddle around the
Well,
bit.
that's the best thing I think you can give your GM is a page to turn for you. It's like created some of the best gifts that I've been able to give my friends as a GM. And some of the best gifts I've received. Like, people are like, "What's your love language?" And I'm like, "Dungeons and Dragons." That's what it is. And I love that. And the things that I've loved about this bard. A friend of mine is in chat, I see, because she's saying her last name. So Calliope Rhymestaff, right? Like, she was born in a one shot that we played with a bunch of Critical Role fans that are local to New York City, and we all met at New York Comic Con, and we were like, oh, let's play a game together. So we played this epic 12-hour one shot, and I tell a lot of that story on my channel in a video. I think it's called "I Wrote a Song for My Bard," because it was so meaningful to me that I ended up writing a song about that session. And I thought to myself, when I was like, man, this character is not done yet. Like, I could just do everything with this character. I want to play her forever. Like, that's how much that session really meant to me, because of the people at the table and like the gifts that we all handed each other during the planning. Like, there was like a month of planning. We were all going to be kids coming back to our what was it? Coming back to our estate, our noble estate, to deal with our father's passing and figure out what we were going to do with the inheritance. And So everyone came together on Discord and all these different like parts of the family, like developing our relationships. And it was like, it led to the deepest. I think there were hours where we didn't roll dice during that game because it was just role play, and it didn't require people to roll checks on each other. It wasn't PvP, right? But it was so meaningful. And I thought when that game was over, you know, I have such a gift here because for every other character, I have to imagine a backstory. But here I've gotten to like live a really cool backstory. I've gotten to live it. And so that's when I started playing this other game. I was like, that's what I have to do. I have to be Calliope just later.
So it doesn't sound like you did very much at that convention as far as convention stuff.
Well, we did so we met at that convention, but we played like about a month later. So we were
Oh,
we were
okay.
all I was doing some I was cosplaying with other critters at that show, and so we met a bunch of Critical Role fans there and got to chatting, and that's how it began, our strange our
Very
strange
cool.
siren song. Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
that also made me think too, like if you can incorporate some of those story elements and a bit of role playing into your session zeros, it'll feel less like wasted time too.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I think the one of the last games that Ted ran that we met up for the session zero, and by the end of it, like we had like fleshed out most of his campaign for him.
Mhm.
We created the villain and basically the antagonist for the campaign and what we were going to be doing for the next 12 sessions.
Oh man.
And and so all he had to do was like he had a premise, and then he just took notes and like fit those notes into the premise that he already had.
Yeah. We did a similar thing, same group of people, where the backstory was that we were all orphans in an orphanage together. Because what adventurer has parents that are alive? Um, or at least that aren't assholes. So yeah, so we all lived in an orphanage. In our session zero, that the part of the session zero that was about character creation was living through how all during a huge dragon attack on the city, how all of the orphans got separated from each other. And then we played through individually with our GM and one-on-ones, like what happened over the 10 years between that and when we would all meet up again. And sometimes we would pull in each other for different like miniature role plays with each other
Mm.
during that 10 years to figure out how certain scenarios would have gone. And it was certainly the most extensive session zero I've ever had. But man, we showed up at that table with things that we had all experienced together, or secrets that we had held from certain people at the table. And it was a pretty intense, if you're like a role player who enjoys the acting of things, which not everybody is, right? And that you don't have to be. It was pretty zero setup to all already know each other.
It sounded a little bit like a campaign zero.
Yeah, it basically was. Yeah, it was kind of like a one shot zero, honestly.
Yeah.
And there weren't a lot of dice rolls in that either. It was just kind of like, well, what do you want to have happen? Or and it gave us ways to give. I mean, a lot of people would call them like give your DM some daggers, right? And we certainly did, but it just gave her little like strings of fate to pull on us and figure out the way we wanted to play our characters, because that is another thing I feel like I go through, where I'll create a character in my mind and then I'll sit down at the table and I'll be like, who are you? Like, you are
Yeah.
not at all what I had set out to do. And so that's kind of like gives you a little bit of extra space to feel it out, or to go back and be like, I don't like that I did that. Can we rewind, in a space that's not canon? Yeah.
And also, like, the knives and daggers don't always have to be bad. They're just interesting twists in the story. Like,
Yeah.
with that rogue, like, she had a bunch of secrets she was keeping. And then
Mhm.
when I introduced, oh, well, guess what? Your husband also has secrets.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, what?
Oh, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
I really love that aspect. And, I think daggers are just things you care about. It's just things that make stakes real for you. It doesn't mean that like for every dagger, oh, you have a child, so that child is now dead, and your congratulations, have some tears. Like
Yeah.
that's not. It doesn't have to be like that. It's just I always say when people are like, "Oh, how many character deaths have you had? Have you ever TPK'd your party when you're GMing?" Like all this stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, sweet summer child, there are fates worse than death, and it's really caring. That is the fate. Is just really, really caring. And of course, it is just a game, so it's not like really caring, and therefore like it ruins relationships because you care so much, right? But it's for the social contract of that period of time. There's nothing better than really being able to escape. I think that's something we all want right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I think creating those stakes for yourself. I did a video on my channel that was like the secret to creating a good character. And obviously, you can create a good character however you create it. But for me, it's about leaning into creating a strong objective and answering some very specific questions so that your GM has something to pull from you and you don't get stuck into writing a 10-page backstory that's not actually going to help you at the table very much. Feel like you're in it.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this before, but I think like not. I mean, within the last, within the existence of Nerdarchy, we were doing a game, and I don't even think it might have only been a one shot or a mini
Yeah.
series. And Ted's like, "Here's my backstory," and it was like 3-4 pages. I'm like, "I'm not reading that. Take it back. Give me the crib notes."
Yeah.
You
I
know?
think I think you need to answer the three questions you need to answer are what would I kill to have or to know? Um who wants to see me fail? And why would I ever do something as crazy as to become an adventurer? Because that is not a great job. Like benefits, not good. Lots of danger. Why are you willing to risk your life with a bunch of people you don't know? You know, if you can answer those three questions in a paragraph or less, you've got enough to sit down and start.
Adventuring is odd, right? Because it's like high risk, but also high reward.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've done it where we've had characters with actual businesses in the game, and then they're like, "Huh, my business earned 3 gold this month," and they just got back from adventure, and
Yeah.
they've got like 3,000 gold.
Gold, and they're like, "What am I doing with my life?"
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. It's strange, but we are up on the hour mark. Final
We
thoughts.
did it.
We did it. It goes by so fast.
I know. We could talk about these things forever. My final thoughts are that this has been really great. Like I love having conversations like this. And I hope people will come over and check out my videos and come hang on Twitch, because if you have more questions about like character creation or like things that I do even on my Discord community as well are just help people workshop their ideas. And it's my most favorite thing to do. Like I can't believe that I basically get to do that for a living now. It's just like talk about people's D&D and like what they can tweak and kind of workshop their ideas, because the worst feeling in the world is feeling like you're alone with your thoughts and so lonely. No, what you're alone with your struggles, either with like how to deal with a person at the table or how to deal with a way you built your character that now you want to retcon, you're not sure how to do it, or I've run out of ideas, I'm burning out on my game, like how do I end it, or like how do I refresh my inspiration. So like these are all things I love to talk about, and I'm so honored that I got to chat about them with you today, Dave.
Well, thanks for coming on and adding your voice to the cacophony of D&D YouTuber voices.
Yeah.
We need more, and we need more diverse voices as well. A lot of times you go on YouTube, we all kind of look the same. So
yeah, absolutely.
With that, until next time, stay nerdy.
Bye.